Hi everyone, welcome back to Planet Dirt. My name is Alicia and we are in my backyard garden. So today is episode 2 of the Nevada Native Plant series. And today we're going to be talking about the difference between noxious weeds and nuisance weeds. So in my state, the Nevada Department of Agriculture actually maintains a list of what we call noxious weeds. And that means that they're not just nuisance weeds, they're not just a pain to deal with, they're actually dangerous in some form. And the state has a requirement that the Department of Agriculture actually maintains and tries to get rid of these weeds. All right, so what is a noxious weed? Noxious weeds are weeds. We don't want them there, right? That's the definition of a weed. But noxious weeds specifically impact biodiversity, impact wildlife, and outcompete native plants that are growing in the area. One example of this is perennial pepperweed. It grows along waterways. I'll put a picture up here so you can see it. And it basically chokes out any native vegetation that wildlife and fish and other things that are growing near the waterways would normally eat, and they can't eat this. Another example is Russian knapweed. Again, I'll put a picture up here. But Russian knapweed actually releases a chemical into the soil that makes it impossible for other things to grow. So not only is it aggressive, it's, again, perennial, so it's just there, it's going to stay there, but it puts out chemicals that impede the natural growth of other things that would normally be growing in that area. Russian knapweed is also dangerous to livestock. So if livestock eat this weed, then it can impact their brain function and inhibits their natural instinct and ability to find food. So these are plants, again, they're a pain for us to deal with, right? But they're also dangerous in some way to either us, livestock, biodiversity, or something else that's trying to grow in the area. All right, let's compare that with nuisance weeds. So nuisance weeds are what we are all used to seeing in our yard. They are things that make it really difficult for grass to grow, for other trees and bushes, the things that you actually want to be growing in your yard. They just kind of impede that. So things like dandelions are a good example. If you have limited space, dandelions can get out of hand very quickly. They grow faster than grass does, and they readily reseed. So those beautiful yellow flowers that pop up, yes, bees love them. They're great for pollinators. But if you have a small growing space like I do, I fight dandelions all the time because they're established in my backyard. And so it doesn't matter how many times I pull them out. I even have one of those like stand-up, I think they're called grandpa tools or something, grandpa's weeding tool. I don't know. I'll put a picture of it up here. I even have one of those and it works great, but dandelion roots go up to 16 inches down in the soil in some cases. And so even when you're pulling out a big chunk of root and you think you've gotten it all, you probably didn't actually get it all, which I've learned over the years because I very diligently went and pulled every single one that I could find, and they still come back. Now, they are manageable. I have gotten rid of the vast majority of them in my yard, but it is something that I have to constantly keep on top of because if I don't, they will come back every single year. And again, for those people who love making dandelion tea, and there's a bunch of other medicinal and herbal uses for them, please continue to do so. I'm not coming at you. I'm just saying, for me personally, it is an issue that I deal with in my yard. Specifically in the perennial bed right behind me, that's an area that I want perennial herbs to grow and thrive. And the whole idea behind that space is, my dog just walked by. I have that space blocked off from my animals because there are grapes growing back there. Grapes, also toxic to dogs. But I have it blocked off. And so it's not super easy for me to access anyway. But it's where I have all my herbs growing. And dandelion seeds blow back there all the time, and that is the number one weed that I have to be back there pulling, and it's just kind of a pain. So it is just the thing that grows easiest around here, so it's the one that I deal with on a regular basis. So the other one that we talked about last time was cheatgrass. Cheatgrass is a very big deal in Nevada just because it dries out really quickly here, and all of that cheatgrass that grew very, very quickly, again, in early spring, it turns into tinder. And so that is a common nuisance weed that we deal with here. The other one is goat head, or puncture vine is what it's actually called. And that one is a pain for animals. It can cause holes in your bike tires and stuff like that. Like things that you don't think about necessarily as a gardener, but they are issues to the general public if they're not maintained. So noxious weeds are legally defined. That means that if I find a noxious weed on my property or out in the general public in my everyday life, that I can call my Department of Agriculture and they will come out and they will get rid of it or assist me in getting rid of it if it's on my property. There are lots of tips and tricks for getting rid of these things. A lot of what I've read in the pamphlet, the little booklet that I got that inspired this whole series. Again, I will put links in the description box below. A lot of the methods of removal are, you have to be consistent with your removal, which it's really difficult for us to do that, right? But most of them are either smothering or putting something that will outcompete it. And that's kind of the method that I have chosen with this perennial bed back here. That perennial bed, it started as the perennial bed in my yard because when I first moved in, there were two things growing back there. There was Virginia creeper, which don't ever grow that. I know it's really pretty, right? But don't ever grow it. You'll never get rid of it, and it is toxic to animals. But you're never going to get rid of it. We started digging up those roots 3-4 years ago. We've been in this house for 5 years. We almost immediately, when we moved in, that was one of the first projects that we tackled in our backyard, was getting rid of those vines. We are still fighting them this many years later, even though we have dug up so many roots. So it was very well established back there. The other thing that was growing back there was mint, specifically spearmint. And I know that's really great. It's not a bad thing to be growing, but it is insanely invasive. And so I went back there with cardboard and lots of mulch. I did chip drop, and I put a good 3-4 inches of mulch on top of the cardboard, and then I poked little holes, and that's where I planted my rosemary and my oregano, and I have some lavender and thyme and stuff back there. It's worked out great, but the mint is still coming back, y'all. Like, it's been covered forever, and it still somehow survived. So what I have done is I have put back there other types of mint that I do want to grow. It's not that I have anything against spearmint. It's just really only good for like tea. I don't know what else I would really use it for. There are other types of mint that I use. We have a family chicken recipe that's mustard and mint. I know it sounds weird, right? But it's really good. Maybe I'll make it on an episode. But that spearmint is kind of too mild for that recipe. So even in cooking, I would rather have a different type of mint. And so this summer, I went down to the nursery. I got a ton of different mint. I planted it all over my yard to try to outcompete the other weeds that are growing everywhere. And especially my front yard where I'm having a real issue growing grass because it's so sandy. But back here, in where that mint is, I put chocolate mint, Moroccan mint, and lemon balm. So my goal back there is not necessarily to get rid of all of the mint that's growing, but to interplant other things that will either grow around the mint or be able to keep up with it. So what better to keep up with mint than more mint? I don't know. At least that's the idea. We'll see if it works out. All right, so just in summary, noxious weeds are everyone's problem. Nuisance weeds are primarily my problem, your problem. In your yard, we're the ones who have to deal with it. It's still good to tackle those things because they can just impede the things that you do want to grow in your yard, but it's on us to deal with it, and that's kind of just how it is. If you do want information on those types of things, I will link, again, the noxious and nuisance weed guides down in the description. Later on in the series, we are also going to be talking about landscaping and just the different strategic things that you can do to help avoid having to deal with these weeds in the first place. So I'm excited for that one coming up. And so the weeds that I did mention, cheatgrass, puncture vine, and dandelions, those are ones that I actually have in my yard. I went through the nuisance guide I went through both the nuisance guide and the noxious weed list, and I didn't have any noxious weeds in my garden, thank goodness. But I do have several of the nuisance weeds, which I guess shouldn't be surprising. It was based on Northern Nevada, and I live in Northern Nevada, so I shouldn't be surprised. But it was really funny to see how many I have in my garden. So the 3 that I mentioned are ones that I actually do have in my garden. I took some pictures. I'll put them up here. These are all things that I deal with in my raised beds, in the cracks in the concrete, on my patio, and they just keep coming back. The vine weed that I mentioned, it's actually bindweed. That one I mentioned a few weeks ago, and also in a short. It's been in my raised beds in my greenhouse for years now, and I just can't get rid of it. And according to the nuisance field guide, I'm probably going to just be dealing with it for the foreseeable future. The only methods of getting rid of things like bindweed are smothering them out, and unfortunately you have to smother them out for up to a year for them to actually die and recede from that part of the soil. And I'm growing in the raised bed. I grow in it year round, so that's really just not too feasible for me. I have toyed with the idea of putting down weed fabric and putting little holes in it. I've seen people on different gardening channels put down weed fabric and then you burn little holes in them, and that's where you plant the seed. I've toyed with the idea of doing that. I might if it gets really, really bad. Or maybe I'll try doing that over the winter, and then I don't know. See, it's so hard because when you put down that weed fabric, you're really limiting yourself to only being able to plant in those specific holes. And then it's hard to turn things over in a bed. And those beds in the greenhouse, in my greenhouse, I'll show a picture here, do get turned over a lot. That's where I plant my onions. That's only a couple months long crop. That's where I plant things over the winter, like my chard and my kale and my cabbage and things like that, that they're not going to stay in there for more than a few months before I'm harvesting it and turning it over for the next season. And so things like smothering that out is probably not going to work for me. I might try around the edges, though, if it gets really bad. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. Anyway, thanks so much for coming along with me today, you guys. I hope you learned something. If you have a particular weed that drives you absolutely nuts, or if you just really love dandelions and you want to stand up for the dandelions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye.